The first thing I noticed about Emily wasn't her smile, her eyes, or even the way she stood trembling on my doorstep. It was the fear in her face. She looked behind her like someone was waiting in the darkness, and when I opened the door, she stepped inside without saying hello. Then she leaned close enough for me to hear her shaking breath and whispered, "Someone's following me." At that exact moment, I saw a black car parked across the street with its headlights turned off. I had never met this woman before. She was supposed to be my blind date. But within seconds, my quiet Friday night had become something I couldn't explain. Before I tell you what happened next, if you believe that kindness can give someone a second chance when they need it most, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear a story like this, leave a comment, and subscribe to The Invisible Line. Your support helps us keep sharing stories about courage, compassion, and unexpected second chances. My name is Daniel, and until that evening, I had almost completely given up on dating. 2 years earlier, I had lost my younger sister, Rachel, after a sudden illness. She had been the person who could walk into any room and make everyone feel safe. After she died, the house became painfully quiet. I stopped going out, I stopped answering invitations. Even my best friend, Matthew, had trouble getting me to leave my apartment. He eventually convinced me to try a dating app, saying that meeting someone new didn't mean forgetting the people I had lost. That was how I met Emily online. We had exchanged messages for nearly 3 weeks. She was funny, thoughtful, and strangely honest. She told me she worked as a medical receptionist and loved old bookstores, rainy mornings, and coffee that was far too sweet. She never talked much about her family. Whenever I asked, she changed the subject. Still, I liked talking to her. There was something about her words that made the loneliness inside me feel a little lighter. So, when she agreed to meet at my house before we went to dinner, I spent an embarrassing amount of time cleaning my living room and trying to decide which shirt looked least desperate. Then, the doorbell rang. I opened it, expecting a nervous woman with a smile. Instead, Emily stood there, pale and breathless, clutching a small handbag against her chest. She immediately looked toward the street. I followed her eyes and saw the black sedan sitting beneath a broken streetlight. When I asked if she knew the person inside, she shook her head. She stepped into my house and begged me to lock the door. I did. My heart was pounding now, but I tried to remain calm. I asked her what was happening, and she told me that she had noticed the car following her several blocks earlier. She had changed streets twice, driven around the neighborhood, and finally parked around the corner before walking to my house. I wanted to call the police immediately, but Emily grabbed my wrist and stopped me. She told me she couldn't trust anyone yet. Then she finally explained why. 3 days earlier, Emily had discovered something terrifying at the medical office where she worked. A patient file had been altered, and the alteration was connected to a man who had died months earlier. Emily had noticed that someone had been accessing confidential records after hours. She reported it to her supervisor, but instead of taking her seriously, the supervisor told her to forget about it. The next morning, Emily found a handwritten note inside her locker telling her to stop asking questions. My first instinct was disbelief. It sounded like something from a movie, not something that could happen in my quiet neighborhood. But then Emily opened her handbag and showed me a photograph. It was a picture of a man leaving the medical office late at night. Behind him was a second person whose face had been deliberately blurred. She said she had taken the photograph because she suspected someone was stealing prescription information and selling it illegally. She believed the man in the picture had discovered her investigation and was now trying to scare her into silence. Suddenly, the black car outside moved. We both froze. The vehicle slowly passed my house and disappeared around the corner. Emily covered her mouth to keep herself from crying. I realized then that whatever her story was, her fear was real. I remembered something my sister Rachel had once told me after I helped a frightened stranger during a storm. She had said that sometimes people don't need you to solve their problems. Sometimes they just need one person who refuses to walk away. So I told Emily she could stay. We turned off the lights and sat quietly in the living room. I called Matthew and told him everything. Unlike me, he didn't waste time wondering whether the story sounded believable. He told me to contact the police and save every piece of evidence Emily had. We did exactly that. An officer named Sarah arrived 20 minutes later, reviewed the photograph, and asked Emily detailed questions. While she was speaking, another officer checked the neighborhood cameras. That was when everything changed. The cameras showed the same black sedan following Emily from the medical office, but the police also discovered something unexpected. The car had been reported stolen 2 weeks earlier. Inside the vehicle, they later found several stolen access cards and documents connected to the medical office. The man behind the entire operation was Emily's supervisor. He had been using employee credentials to access private medical information and sell it. When Emily noticed the irregularities, he panicked. The frightening messages, the surveillance, and the stolen car had all been part of an attempt to intimidate her into leaving the matter alone. But he hadn't expected Emily to bring the evidence to someone she barely knew. And somehow, that someone was me. The police took Emily somewhere safe that night. Before leaving, she stood at my door with tears in her eyes and thanked me for believing her. I told her that I hadn't known whether everything would turn out to be true, but I knew one thing. She was afraid, and she deserved to be safe. She smiled through her tears and said that was more than enough. I thought that would be the end of our story. It wasn't. A week later, Emily returned to my house. This time, there was no fear in her eyes. She carried 2 cups of coffee and an old bookstore receipt tucked inside a book. She told me she had finally decided to accept the dinner date we had planned before everything went wrong. We laughed about how strange our first meeting had been. There had been no romantic music, no perfect restaurant, and certainly no ordinary first date conversation. There had only been fear, uncertainty, and one locked door. But somehow, that night had opened another door in both of our lives. Emily eventually testified in the case, and the investigation exposed a much larger network than anyone expected. Her courage helped protect countless patients whose information might have been stolen. As for me, I slowly began living again. I started visiting bookstores with Emily. I answered my friends' calls. I even began talking about Rachel without feeling like mentioning her name would break me. Months later, Emily and I returned to the same doorstep where our strange story had begun. She looked at me and smiled, reminding me that she had once arrived terrified that someone was following her. I told her that, strangely enough, I was grateful she knocked on my door. Because sometimes life sends us people when we least expect them. Sometimes they arrive carrying fear instead of flowers, secrets instead of promises, and broken hearts instead of perfect smiles. And sometimes, helping someone feel safe becomes the beginning of healing your own heart. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who believes in kindness, and subscribe to The Invisible Line. You never know when one small act of compassion might become someone else's reason to keep going. And before we end, I have one special request for you. Comment, "I would have opened the door," if you believe everyone deserves a safe place when they are afraid. Because Emily came to my door believing someone was following her. She left knowing someone was finally standing beside her. And I opened the door thinking I was helping a stranger. I never realized I was opening the door to a second chance for both of us.